and Facebook. Okay, so good afternoon and welcome to this live panel discussion where I'm going to take a deep dive behind the queer politics of Prime Minister Anthony Albanese that he wants you to cheer about. This Saturday will mark the start of the biggest Pride Mardi Gras parade that Australia has seen. The parade has attracted federal funding and has been promoted as an international tourist event with a month of what's being promoted as Worldwide Pride Month. Joining me today in the Freedom Media studios is Raylene Stokes, and Raylene is a registered clinical counsellor with over 25 years experience as a marriage counsellor, a sex therapist and a clinical sexologist. Raylene offers her clients marriage counselling, couples counselling, sex therapy, sex advice and sex therapy practice here in WA, in fact from the suburb of Manoora. Raylene holds a master's degree in sexual health sexology, also holds a Bachelor of Science degree in counselling and an advanced diploma in counselling. And until 2 weeks ago, she was the Australian president of, and I just think I've got that there.
ASSERT, the Australian Society of Sex Educators, Researchers and Therapists.
So there we go. Thank you, Raylene, for your time and welcome to the studios here. And I'm certain that most people by now may be surprised and will be extremely concerned with the intervention of politics regarding gender conversion therapy. Also joining this panel here is a person that's no stranger to streams at Freedom Media WA, and that is Dr. Mark Lofts. Welcome, Dr. Mark.
Thank you, Lindsay. Glad to be here.
And so we're going to kick straight in there. And as we've already said, we've talked about the Gay Pride happening this Saturday. And what's been, I guess, a little bit unknown is the fact that Anthony Albanese had made quite a historical announcement, I guess, a couple of days ago, and something that has had no coverage or next to no coverage by mainstream media. To set the context of this discussion, I'm going to just play that now, and just while I get myself into that particular part there. So here we go. Thanks, Clayton. Back to the.
We need to celebrate our diversity, not just tolerate it.
Unveiling a new safe space in Sydney, the country's highest politician makes an historic promise.
I'll be the first Prime Minister not to watch the march on Mardi Gras, but to march.
Oh, just vote for Albo. I don't want the job. Oh, what message do you want to send to the world?
I'm too sexy for my shirt, too sexy for my shirt, so sexy it hurts.
Thank you so much, Penny. Happy Mardi Gras.
So there we go. And a little bit of footage from last year's Mardi Gras, which was COVID restricted, and some footage again from this year. So the announcement that Anthony Albanese has actually, in fact, he's going to be the first Prime Minister to march in Gay Pride. What does that mean? What does that mean in relation to this stream here? So I think I'm just going to set the context. The only media outlet that gave an insight as to what was occurring was Sky News, not the national broadcaster ABC, nor Channel 7, nor Channel 9, nor Channel 10. So we're just going to play this package, and this will set the context of this panel discussion. So here we go.
We need to celebrate
Makes an historic.
our diversity. I'll be the first Prime Minister not to watch the march on.
No, that's my error there. Hang on one moment. Sorry, I'm just going to keep it on that screen there. Thanks,
We need to celebrate.
So this festival is the backdrop to this important conversation that's been had about whether or not to ban gay conversion therapy in New South Wales. Labor leader Chris Minns has said today that he does want to see that banned if he's elected as the Premier on March the 25th. Here was Penny Sharp, an Upper House Labor MP.
know now in modern Australia that the practices of the past can no longer stand, and a Minns Labor government is going to set in train the process to change the laws so that we will end conversion practices for the LGBTIQ community. Everyone should be very proud of who they are, and they should be able to live their life freely in New South Wales, and that's what we're going to do.
The New South Wales Premier has said that if he is re-elected, he'll be looking at this legislation carefully.
As I said, ultimately from my perspective, in the time that I've been in government, I've always encouraged people that we need to work through those issues and treat everybody with respect, understanding and tolerance, and that's what our government has always been about. Now, in relation to legislation that comes forward, we always look at those issues. We make sure that every piece of legislation is dealt with on its merits, and we'll consider those matters in due course.
A ban on this practice would bring New South Wales in line with the ACT, Victoria and also Queensland. Western Australia is also considering similar legislation.
Okay, so that sets the scene for the discussion. And when I was compiling this, I actually had in mind another particular stream. One thing led to another because it actually came about. I was trying to get an understanding of what gay conversion therapy is. So I guess by way of introduction, Raylene, if you wouldn't mind explaining.
Yes, well, it's been around for a long time, since the 1950s, from Robert Hobson. It was based on religious issues and concerns for people being gay, which was not accepted. In modern world today, I actually think it's a great thing to ban conversion therapy. It's diabolical, it's inhumane, it's trying to brainwash innocent brains of feeling something that they're not. It is trying to allow them or to make them or break them psychologically and physically into being a human being that they don't identify with. So I'm actually all for stopping conversion therapy. I really had hoped it had stopped years ago, before 1999, when Robert Hobson had passed away, when he said to the world and admitted that he had made a mistake with conversion therapy. However, the practice has continued on. It's diabolical and it's actually not therapy. But I do have concerns. I have concerns in regards to, whilst it's a good thing not having conversion therapy, realistically, one has to look behind the scenes with this. And whilst we're banning this type of conversion therapy, we've really, as far as I'm concerned, switched it over to another form of conversion therapy, which is toward our children. And it is about transgendering. And for me, and what I see is, we might be stopping conversion therapy per se, but in actual fact, it's just a modern name for still continuing the practice with our young children and converting them into transgender people.
And I guess, and as you've just alluded to, if you look into this, you'll see that it's being portrayed, and do a quick Google search, and it's talking about practices in the past of Christian-based colleges and so forth. And the saying that I seem to have found that jumped out is, you can't pray the gay away. And they're talking about practices that if a Christian college might have a counselling service offered to a student, a person who identifies as a male, but they think that they might be a female, and they help them with counselling to help them re-identify with their biological gender. And I guess, Dr. Mark, I'll just ask you, when I actually spoke to you about this stream as well, and I said to you gender conversion therapy, and you posed the question, does it mean A or does it mean B?
That's right, because conversion therapy, you wonder whether you've been converted to the sex you were born with, or you're trying to be converted to the other sex. So it does have an ambiguous sound to it.
So, and also a person that I've spoken to many a times, not only about medical issues, but also in relation to politics as well. And we've just seen that package there, Dominic Perrottet. He has the election coming in 3.5 weeks, under a tremendous amount of pressure there, because Labor have said if they get in, they will introduce this. Western Australia are already down the rabbit hole in relation to this legislation. And this is the crux of this discussion. As Raylene's already alluded to, transgenderism, and we're talking, it goes further.
Yes, it does.
And it really is a controversial topic, one that is getting no conversation. And I think it's important from the outset, I'll perhaps hand over to yourself, Raylene, to make a disclaimer. This is not an attack on trans people.
Absolutely not. So this is about transgender ideology from a minority group of transgender people. There are lots of transgender people who do not agree with what we're seeing today, which is gender affirming with our children, another form of conversion therapy. What parents and the community of this country are not aware of, which is hidden away, is the destruction of our education system. And whilst Albanese is quite happy to put his face out there, probably more for votes, Labor in this country have ignored thousands of concerning letters from individuals, parents, therapists like myself, questioning what's going on with ethics and professionalism. We are now in schools which a lot of parents aren't aware of, and those that are, there are plenty that are very concerned and worried. They have no rights. Parents don't have rights if your children decide, and if possibly maybe they're brainwashed through what's being educated in primary school. We're talking about young kids who shouldn't be educated on how to put a condom on, how ejaculation works, and sex toys. And yes, it's not a joke, it's happening right now. There are photos out, thank goodness, from certain people having the courage to do so. This is unacceptable, and the question that really comes to mind is, are we moving from conversion therapy to affirming therapy, which in my view is not therapy at all? It's unethical, we're not asking questions, we're not seeing what's going on with an individual. It's not about stopping an individual transgendering, it's about working out whether they really need to and is it for them. And the debate here that we're not talking about is with transgender or transitioning, 75% of transitioners detransition. And when we speak to detransitioners, they're thrown out like garbage. Their bodies are tortured, mangled, brutalised. They are on medication for the rest of their lives. Now that is like conversion therapy. It messes with the brain, it's brainwashing them to be something they're not, and now physically they're dealing with something they can't cope with. And what my understanding is globally, there is no research or data being kept in this area, which raises significant questions of why not. With detransitioners, they are classed not as gay or heterosexual, but as non-binary, which is absolutely hypocrisy. And so really, and along with this, the concern is if we've got politicians telling therapists and doctors and certain ethical professional people how to be, changing our IDs and telling us we affirm with people, well, we may as well just close the door on psychology like we are on biology and sociology. So it is great concern.
And I guess you mentioned closing the door, and I just want to highlight teaching children how to put on condoms. That's, you know, I remember having that sex education in high school years.
Yes.
But you're talking about primary school years.
Yes.
You're talking about early...
8, 9-year-olds, my understanding down to 7. I've had families come to me, fathers crying, where one particular child who's 7 was told that he's transgender. And the family have come to me in tears, and I'm a therapist and I can't offer any service because there isn't any. Because if this family, what people and parents don't realise is if a child is manipulated at school, and I can go on by who they're manipulated by, but if they're manipulated into confusion therapy is what I call it as well, what am I? And going home and saying, I think I'm this, and the parents don't assimilate, that child will be gone. There'll be gag orders before you know it, and you won't be able to tell the rest of the population. There are 100 cases plus going on in this country right now where children have been taken from families under the age of 14 and bodies ripped to shreds.
So let's talk about some of the elements, the gag orders, as you've mentioned. And to give you an idea, if you look at the ACT legislation that's in place, Queensland are well and truly down the road in relation to this. I think it's been passed. They're waiting for it to be assented, or it's waiting for the second reading in Parliament. The gag orders that we're talking about here is any health professional, not only medical, but any health professional, that a doctor is not able to make a diagnosis, and if they refuse that diagnosis, then they face criminal sanctions.
That's right.
As well as civil sanctions. And Dr. Mark, we know with what we've seen throughout the pandemic, they face the threat of deregistration.
That's right. This is absolutely criminal. You have doctors who make a diagnosis of a patient having a gender dysphoria, or saying that it's too trivial a diagnosis to make, and they're threatened with removal of their licence of practice if they do. But what really horrifies me is that you have surgeons who are willing to maim people, to turn them transsexual, to make their anatomy appear that of the opposite sex, but they cannot perform as the opposite sex. You can be born one sex, but you cannot perform when you become the opposite sex. You are not fertile. You cannot turn ovaries into testes or vice versa. The number of people born who have both an ovary and a testis, I think it's barely recorded in medical literature. There are many people who are intersex, and we should distinguish them from people who are transsexual or gay or lesbian, because people who are truly intersex have to make up their minds what to do, and they make their minds up particularly as adults, and they get themselves operations as needed. But forcing these operations onto little kids and allowing them to be suggested to that they should be the other sex, this is a criminal action by our schools and by the mass media that are pushing it onto little children. This is an absolutely horrific circumstance, and what we're going to have is a whole lot of maimed children and very, very angry adults within the next 20 years.
And I think, as you've seen from the introduction package, that this is the ideology of the far left.
Yes.
It's been coming for a long time. You can go back and have a look at Anthony Albanese. He's been talking about gay pride and standing up for gay rights for some time, I guess, laying the foundation for this very point that we find ourselves in at the moment. Raineen, as a health professional practicing in that space, I guess, if you had a person that came to you, and even if it's a child, because you can treat children.
Yes.
So you're qualified to treat children, and you felt, well, the impact of the legislation, you've got an idea of what's coming down the pipeline.
Oh, yes.
And that child asks for, say, a referral to a doctor who would prescribe puberty blockers. So I guess between yourself and Dr. Mark, let's talk about puberty blockers. Does it really block puberty, or what are the potential long-term?
Well, long-term, it's very damaging, not physical and mentally. I think there's two separate areas. Even for trans people who are happy in their bodies, will always have health issues to consider till the day they die. They will be on medication till the day they die, which interferes with health problems. And of course, they become sterilised. And but the issue I have, or concern, and going back, to 2018, the last statistics globally of gender transition was 0.001%. Now, only a couple of years later, we're over 7% of the world population. So this is actually a phenomena. We're not talking about it. This is a cult. We're not talking about it as the real issue. And it is and has taken over. We have, and again, I must state, there are plenty of beautiful trans people here who also are not in alignment of this ideology, just like many gay and lesbian people are not either. This is a very deep, dark web, and I don't care what people talk and say about me. At the end of this, my biggest concern is pedophilia, and we are certainly not talking about that. But for me, if I'm told to affirm somebody, going back to your question, Lindsay, comes to me and a young person, I am not going to affirm that they're that agenda. I'm going to talk to them. I'm not going to disagree either, but I'm going to use my code of ethics as a therapist, first and foremost, and find out what is going on. What we do know, and there's plenty of research to back it, is that, and my greatest concern with transgender ideology, is the environments they are creating for their children. In the UK, we have now trans people wanting to trans their children 4 and 6 years of age. And politically, let alone going back to Dr. Mark and our disgust with the medical people to torture and rip open innocent bodies to destroy them, this is just like the war. It really is. This is what we did to torture the opposite, the enemy. And here we are creating, and let's not also forget, we need to have a debate here. It is going to be, the way it's headed, unless we stop it, $1 trillion business. Now, if we look at the dollar value, and I know I've derailed from psychological, but I think the community and people really need to discuss, this is actually not about psychology. It is not about transgender. It is about a small group of people in this global enterprise becoming trillionaires. Yep. And we are headed for trillionairism. Pharmaceuticals and the medical people should be ashamed and disgusted. This is what they did in Auschwitz. This is what they did in Munich to the Jews, cutting brains open. There is no difference here, and Labor should be ashamed to support that fact that we're not talking about.
And that's just touching some of these things. You know, it's hard to hear. It shouldn't be a hard conversation because this is reality. This is what you're actually talking about. And I want to come to you, Dr. Mark, but before I do, you mentioned, as a health practitioner, I asked you, a health professional, I asked you that question. The legislation, that if I suggested to you that in the ACT, the model that they have there, the model in Tasmania, the model in Victoria, the model in Queensland, that if a parent decided that they wanted to make parental decisions for their child, to at least allow the child to be a child and get to 18 years of age, that a parent can face the same criminal sanctions that you as a health professional under this legislation which they're looking to introduce. That's
right. And as far as I'm concerned, it's the modern stolen generation, and these are the words and language we should be talking about. When parents have no right of a 6-year-old, and mark my words, this is going on right here in WA and in this country, when we are taking children away from parents and putting them into foster care, never to be seen again. Not only is it a stolen generation, but when Labor people and ministers don't get back to us to answer these questions, where are these children? We can only assume something very sinister. And these kids are left to defend for themselves. We're talking about teens, this is factual, 14, 15, 16-year-olds, put in dorm-type rooms and left to defend for themselves as opposed to being with their parents. Now, what sort of therapy and people, that's inhumane.
And I think and I do want to come back to yourself, Dr. Mark, but I just, based on what you just said then, Raylene, to highlight what you're saying then, that young children as young as 6 are being taken out and lost into the system. The recent example, in fact, it broke last night on mainstream media. There's been a lot in Western Australia talking about Banksia Hill and the detention of Indigenous Aboriginals and what they're doing there. So why am I saying that, and how am I linking that to this issue? Because what they've said last night on mainstream media, and if it's on mainstream media, then it's happening, is that the McGowan government has been caught for wanting. They've admitted that they've lost records of how long children were kept in isolation,
Yes.
and things like that. So the segue that I'm making there, if this is happening right now in a space that most people may have some awareness of, if it's happening at Banksia, it's happening within the system, potentially, that they get lost there. Dr. Mark, my question, puberty blockers, if I suggested to you that the medication is the same type of medication that in the US, for example, where they prescribe chemical castration, and in some therapy practices here, it's the same medication?
Well, generally the same, but the basic practice is to try to delay puberty so that they can then give the opposite hormones to try you to develop the characteristics of the opposite sex. So they basically have to try to delay puberty so that they can then start giving you the treatment to turn you into the opposite sex. But this can cause a lot of damage as well, because as you continue to grow during adolescence with the puberty blockers, by the time you do start on the on the active hormones to transition to the opposite sex, you can still have further bone problems, or your bones can close over before you get to a larger size, or if you want to be a smaller size, you can have more problems. In that when you take the hormones for the opposite sex, you will never get a fully satisfactory response, because even in children, you're already moving towards the form of body you'll have as an adult, and thus as a trans person, you will very rarely have the ideal body form, etc., of the opposite sex. So what you're doing is creating a fake self. If you're male, you cannot really be a female. If you're a female, you cannot really be a male. And all this puberty blocker business, apart from its own problems of blood clots, etc., that it might cause, all this is merely obstructing the normal bodily growth, and you should not be interfering with that, nor suggesting that children should be put on this long course of treatment, especially when all these people who've been maimed from all the surgery, when they get older, they're going to have a hell of a lot of other problems. We don't know what they're going to be as yet, because we don't have many people who've been operated on for this. And what is a transsexual person going to be like at the age of 55 or 60 when they start getting various surgical problems like urinary tract infections, etc.? So the doctors and the others who've been involved in this haven't thought properly about what these puberty blockers and all the other treatments are actually going to do to people. Basically, the trans population are essentially going to be reduced to unhappy neuters. They become neuter people, not really transsexuals at all, because the idea of transsexuality is basically a fantasy. It can't really be established in human beings.
And I just wanted to jump in and say, when I spoke to yourself, Raylene, we only really spoke yesterday or the day before.
Yesterday.
This stream has come about quite quickly because of your time availability. I mean, Dr. Mark, I rang him last night, told him what was happening, and without question, he said, absolutely, tell me what time. You're happy to take questions if we get them. I can see comments coming through, so thank you to those that are watching. I can see your comments through. I just want to pick up and maybe just sort of double back a little bit. Daniel's raising the comment, and we've seen this a lot. Probably what most people would be more familiar with and not really understanding what's coming down the pipeline is the desensitization of these particular things. And Daniel's raised the issue or raised a comment about MAPS. You know, what exactly is MAPS? Minor attracted persons. So when, Raylene, you've mentioned pedophilia, and then they're no longer calling it for what it is.
That's right.
I mean, if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, we call it a chicken. So they're saying now that a person, is not attracted to a child, they're attracted to a minor aged person. And you can see the legislation that's already unfolded around a mature minor, which takes away parental rights. And I did a stream about this the other day where Mark McGowan came out telling parents that parents need to parent. Well, the system is such that legislation's come in place now that parents are prevented
That's right.
by this extremely, disturbing some of the practices, that these children will potentially undergo. My point was, thank you for the comments coming in. Keep them coming. I will be looking from side to side and monitoring those, and I'll put them either to Raylene or to Dr. Mark. I do want to say, I just can see, so do we have a tech issue there? Or? Oh, okay. But everything else is all okay? Thank you. Now I do want to come back to, so health professionals, if this legislation comes in, will face sanctions. Parents, if they, want to allow their child to get to 18, they potentially will face, stories of children being taken away out of homes against the parents' wishes.
There's 100 cases already in this country, and every one of them gagged. Now, if they're gagged, what for? What are people concerned about? Or should I say politicians and ministers first and foremost? But I do have to mention there are therapists who are already losing their practice, who've lost their licence and who are threatened with jail term. And this is just the beginning over pronouns, making simple mistakes, a typo for one person that I'm referring to. And all of a sudden, a transgender person has called it out, offended by it and suing. And this person, by the way, 18 months ago also won a case for the same situation. So there's a cha-ching, cha-ching. And I have to be blunt here because at the end of the day, all this leads to is money and control. And I think, for politicians making these laws, how dare you tell me that I have to change my work when I've studied for decades and I class myself as highly professional and ethical. Once upon a time, I specialised with gender identity and sexual orientation. I ran workshops for over 12 years in this area, and all of a sudden I find myself now, wow, I have to get it critiqued by legal to make sure I'm not offending anybody. And, I'm sorry, what's the purpose of that? Who am I offending? This has never been an issue before. And so it's actually very scary times for therapists. Many have left the practice, many are concerned, and there's certainly a lot of us who will not ID with a new ID. I am not a her, she. I have my identity and I should be allowed to just keep that. I respect someone else's ID though, which I would of course be accommodating for. But really also we need to be looking at, this is authoritarianism, or is it beyond that? We are being controlled. We are being told how to be, and I'm sorry, that's not democracy that I know of. And we're brainwashing children, leave them alone. We do know that our brain develops further from 12 to 25. So why are we hampering and tampering with these young minors when they have no right to consent? And yet, if you feel you're doing the right thing by these individuals, why have you waived their right to sue? Can't sue you, politicians, can't sue medical, can't sue therapists. Well, there's a reason for that too. And getting back to Dr. Mark, the big issues that we are facing, where is your research? We've had scientific research about about the consequences of transgendering, in particular young people, and it's been around since the 1990s. And all of a sudden, there's more research from Italy and Sweden within the last 6 months. We realise we've made a mistake, was the heading, with gender transitioning. And here we are in Australia ignoring all the scientific evidence. So I propose to you, Anthony Albanese, and state politicians, where is your evidence for this deplorable change, which is authoritarian at its minimum and very abusive to the community, all of us involved?
Yeah, and I think, again, coming back to the legislation, because it's an area, I look at different things and I try and pick up what's happening this is coming in Western Australia.
Oh, yes.
We know
yes.
McGowan, he smashed through the Kill the Bill in terms of the pandemic response after the state of emergency. He will smash through this legislation.
Secretively, sorry, Lindsay, because it was last year he put through legislation that affected therapists and health professionals with affirming rights and, of course, the idea of pronouns. But what he did was sneakily put it through legislation because plenty of counselling and psychology associations were not informed. We weren't advised for our opinions, but instead on the very day that submissions were due is when we got notified.
And of course that's going to be alarming for health care professionals, and you've got these people with years and years like yourself of experience that have decided that they just don't want to face a criminal charge at the end of their working careers, at the middle, even young health professionals starting out. But then it's going so far as we're having parents that are being deemed by the Department of Child Protection as abusive parents because they're misgendering their children.
That's right.
So that and that has to be, a family that is loving, caring, and all. That's the ideal concept. I mean, we are judged as a society, then. And as a family unit, when we are successfully looking and providing and caring for our children.
Yep.
And I've mentioned this on many streams previously. I did a stream about an event that City of Fremantle, it was November, they were looking to hold a drag queen show where they were inviting children as young as 12 to come and learn how to be a drag queen or king for the day. And, we were talking about that. If you think that this is not happening, this weekend in Midland, a company called Headspace is running a Sexpo. Now we know Sexpo at Perth Convention Centre. It's a massive event that has from one end of and everything's consensual. It's 100% consensual. It's adults. You can only be 18 if you to get into that particular event. You cannot enter as what we deem at criminal and family law as a minor under 18, but civil or common law, it seems McGowan and state Labor government, federal governments are deeming the mature minor, as long as they think that the person understands. Headspace this weekend are running an event where they're having a Sexpo for children as young as
12.
As young as 12.
Yeah, this is what's going on here. I think you brought up an important point. What they're doing is blurring the boundaries between male and female, and blurring the boundaries between adult and child. They could easily end up lowering the voting age to 16, 14, 12, and that will also alter the age of consent. After all, if now we've got children 4 and 5 deciding they want to be the other sex because they've played with a doll or played with a truck or something, now you're going to have the idea of age of consent for changing one's sex to be the age of 2 and 3. We're basically building complete insanity into our society if we allow this to continue. And where is the boundary to be put?
Walking straight into pedophilia, which again we keep, the government of today is very good at changing basic language that the community understand. This is pedophilia. Why on earth should we even consider teaching 8 and 9-year-olds how to put a condom on? Let's get back to basics. Why? I'm sure we've got better educational times for children to learn appropriate learnings. And getting back to age appropriateness, you're right. It wasn't that long ago Mark McGowan decided he might just put the age of alcohol or drinking to 21. And yet all of a sudden in this area of sexual abuse, which I'll call it, it's gone right down. And consent is realistically, they're talking about, they already are, to 13. That is pedophilia. That is giving to a very sick, dark web, a minority again of people controlling the whole populace.
Yet conversely, there's again a lot of pressure with McGowan talking about raising the criminal age of responsibility. Currently in Western Australia, a child aged between 10 and 14 is not criminally responsible for a criminal offence if what they did they knew, or they if they don't know that it's wrong, then they're not criminally responsible. So McGowan is resisting that urge. He wants to keep it exactly as it is now. He doesn't want to dispense with that. But on the flip side as well, they're talking about lowering. This is Labor. This is,
yes.
and it doesn't matter. It's a Labor leftist ideology. Lowering the voting age.
Yeah.
Lowering the voting age, and what's that about? It's about appealing to, convincing that particular population that, okay, well, we will do things that your parents are telling you no. Just
That's
vote
right.
for us.
That's exactly right. But we've got to look at what is really going on. Why are politicians abiding by this? Getting back to 10 and 14-year-old, that particular law, you're right, Lindsay. However, what people may not know in WA, I believe it still exists. So up until a few years ago, I was seeing quite a few minors, as in 14 and between 13 and 14, more so. But the law was, or still is in this state, from the age of 10 up, you're treated as an adult if you're caught being groomed as a pedophile and you have over 3,000, or let's say a few thousand photos. These are children still. These are young adults who have no idea what's going on, who've been groomed by pedophiles online, who all of a sudden have been caught out through the police looking at all these photos they've actually downloaded and opened. Now, they wouldn't be looking for that. They were actually given that, being groomed by pedophiles, proven.
Wow.
Yet it gets worse. These young ones are tried in adult court and convicted as an adult. So how does that work? Is
So
that
the
not
real adults-
exactly right?
That's right. The real adults, the ones who are the paedophiles, are getting away free, and the child
Yes.
is blamed.
And I used to get quite a lot of referrals from certain agencies here years ago, and all of a sudden I've had none.
So
And I wonder what's
that's in
going
Western
on.
Australia. You're saying
That's right.
in-
Yeah. Some other states are a bit different now over the years.
I'm really struggling to get my head around.
Yeah,
I
and so what
really
that
am.
means for a young person, if they're called, if they're labelled a pedophile, they're a child sex offender. They're on the sex offender list from 10
The
up.
register, yeah, I do know that.
They're not
there's-
allowed to be with their family members. Where do they go?
Yeah, they go into the dark web.
That's right, to be groomed all the more.
That's right.
That set them up.
And
Wow.
how can we, and Mark McGowan or any other politician for that matter, and in actual fact, the law, the judicial system, how disgusting and despicable is that?
And they're not opposing
These are
this.
kids. We're not looking at the pedophiles. We're not looking at saving this individual. Oh, no, we're going to use you for our purpose.
So again, thank you very much. Keep the comments coming in. I can see a comment, if that's right, if I'm understanding that from, oh no, that's somebody just mentioning in the UK. But Peter, thank you very much for the shares. It is, I guess it's, you won't have a panel discussion. You won't have the ABC national broadcaster have this type of discussion on this topic. So the only way that this type of information can get around is it comes down to you. Raylene comes in and she tells her side of it. Dr. Mark, we have here for comments. We can generate the conversation, but unless you share this stream, liking is not enough, as I say. Share, because that's the way that it gets out there, because otherwise it's just an echo chamber conversation. And this legislation coming in, it's fraught with danger. I'm not going to change the tack, but I'm just going to capitalise on a couple of things that you've mentioned, Raylene. You've said, so children with images that it may not necessarily be then, they're being fed, they're being
That's
groomed,
right. Mm-hmm.
and they're being essentially set up. I do remember what you're talking about, the sex offender register, because one of the things is you won't be able to travel to
That's right, overseas.
Particular countries around the world if you have or find yourself on the sex offender register. But we've had many conversations around mobile phones and the influence nowadays of young kids at very, and it seems to be getting younger and younger. Mobile phones are not a babysitter. Mobile phones are not a parent, and they're not a tool to keep a child entertained or happy because of the pressures that unfortunately is occurring with life. And probably one of the most, the platforms, I guess, and it's a massive platform. That's TikTok. And talking about, aside from the fact that it's very clearly stated in the disclosure that TikTok, being a Chinese company, CCP, they're tracking your metadata.
Yes.
And the phones could be listening to so on and so forth. But there's many things. There is a person who goes by the name of Jeffrey Marsh in the US, and he puts out, it's a platform. And I guess to take the line of Mark Dice is, I watch mainstream media so you don't have to. And in this instance, I'm watching TikTok so you don't have to. To highlight that the extent and the traction that this has got, and it's got massive amount of momentum. My eyes are still rolling from the last couple of days. I'm just going to play a couple of short clips and I'll get some comments from you. So we'll go with the first one if we can. Thanks, Clayton. Oh, in a minute, that might have been me. We'll just start back. Yep. I did mute the audio, and I'm just going to, I just need to. So if you can just cut back to
the problem with this LGBTQ people are dangerous.
And I'm just going to back up to that one, and apologise for this. I hit the mute on the keyboard, and that's what did. So thanks very much, Clayton, for that. So here we go. So let's just have a look at Jeffrey Marsh on TikTok.
The problem with this LGBTQ people are dangerous for children thing is that it distracts from the real perpetrators. Stat after stat, study after study proves that it is grown men targeting young girls. And while TERFs and the far right are putting my face on Fox News, they're obsessed with me in my apartment making videos, the real predators get away with everything. It's almost like they don't really care about children, and that all these people are just bigots.
Rolling. That the real predators are men with young girls.
Boys and girls. If I'm legally allowed to say that these days, and there's another problem, we don't know what to say. I partly agree. I think, again, it comes back to there are trans people who are fantastic, who aren't abusers, who don't buy into this. And then there is the other, I'm going to call it my words, the sicker part of the ideology. And part there, I don't see all of them dangerous to children at all. I see, I agree with what she's saying, that we need to be focusing on what's more important around children. And that's an image, though, erasing with the male, female. I think.
Well, let's have a look.
I've gone beyond.
We'll jump into that. So I guess I'll just, Dr. Mark.
Yeah.
So I get on the premise, as I understand what Raylene's saying, is that it's not men with young girls. It's men with children.
That's right. It's mainly men. Paedophilia, male paedophilia. There is some female paedophilia as well, but it's mainly male paedophilia, and that's what you worry about with transsexual men who think they've become women. They're allowed to go into women's toilets. They're allowed to participate in sport, and being men, they'll tend to win sport, and thus the genotypic females are being pushed out and losing at sport, and it's made everything basically unfair.
Yeah. Hence the reason why Ed aligns, I guess, because he's competing with the narrative here by saying minor attracted persons, because it's taking the gender out. So don't be fooled. You agree in part, but don't be fooled. It's not just men with young girls. It's men with children.
Yeah.
That's the kick here. But
yes.
So Raylene's just seeing what's on next. Clayton, we'll just going to play the next little clip and just see what you think of this.
Hi, I don't have a uterus. I'm non-binary, and I wanted to say something about trans-inclusive language and abortion. Thank you. What I see people doing is using the word women when they mean women, and using the word people who need abortion services when they mean people who need abortion services. They are technically two different things, and I would hope that we all wouldn't want to push linguistically for birthing and pregnancy to be synonymous with womanhood for a lot of reasons. So, trans-inclusive language doesn't erase anyone.
Now, I'm going to cut straight to Raylene here because you couldn't see her face.
I would like to erase that.
And I'm trying not to, I mean, this is no laughing matter, but if you could have seen Raylene's face, what do you say in response to that?
I think it's absolutely absurd. What's going on in that sense, I totally disagree, and it's disgusting. The ideology of this minority group is trying to take away womanhood from biological women. How dare any of you tell a woman they can't say they're a mother? How dare any of you say that I cannot be a grandmother? Go away, I say to you. Go and live in your own world. Happy for you there, but don't interrupt the real world. And this language business is nothing that... How can this minority group, a very minority group, control? And the very fact that it's attacking women would want me to ask, what's your problem with your home life and your mother? And what are your issues with women that you so hate us, which is a very strong word, but how I feel, that you want to deplete and erase us? For a beard and mascara? I'm sorry. It's just gone too far.
That's right.
I didn't mean to trigger yourself there, Raylene. Dr. Mark, you're about to jump in.
Yeah.
I have a question for you, but go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to point out that at least in New South Wales, when I had to get a death certificate for my father's sister in order to get a plaque put for my mother at Warrenora Cemetery, still haven't been able to do it. When I had to fill in the form, it gave me a listing birth parent. There was no mother or father. They just used the term birth parent instead. Yeah. So they're basically destroying motherhood by pretending not to recognise it. And as for the underlying ideology that's supporting this is the ideology of the Frankfurt School. You only have to read Herbert Marcuse and his book, Eros and Civilization, where he wrote in 1955, he was pushing the blurring of boundaries of male and female, an adult and child, saying that beauty is beauty and it doesn't matter whether the person's male, female, adult and child. And he finally comes out and says it, quote, "The road to higher culture leads through the true love of boys." Yeah. And so you just have to read that book, published in 1955, to see the whole agenda set out to essentially destroy society as we know it and push people into relationships which cannot produce children, let alone care and love for them.
Yes.
So there we go. And Kat, thank you very much for your comment. I can see, as Raylene's alluded to earlier, Kat's comment is that it's for future business. And you've mentioned it's a business that is worth billions worldwide. Yeah. Dr. Mark, my question is, and we've seen this happen globally. Matt Walsh talks about his documentary, What is a Woman? We've seen Senator Alex Antic ask in federal parliament here about 6 months ago if the health department, the federal health department, could define what a woman was. Of course, they couldn't. Can a person with a penis give birth?
No, it's not possible because you haven't got a womb, you haven't got a uterus to have a baby to grow in. You haven't got a vagina to carry the baby through to the outside world. So no, and the people who, very rare people who do have both a testis and an ovary, they have distorted anatomy so that they could not give birth.
Can I just jump in,
Sure.
though? Medically, recently I read, though, medically, again, it's just, I can't believe it, they have already been creating the vagina for men to have babies. Hence why over the last 12 months in particular, men can have babies. It's like what is going on?
What, like a
However,
uterus?
that's right. They literally have created the fake vagina for pregnancy. And I just think it's gone too far. I also believe that, this is such a target on women. How would you feel if you weren't allowed to be a father, a dad? What is the impact there? How do you feel of women or men coming in with vaginas into the change rooms, watching you unchanged? Let's reverse this for a moment, because this has happened to me. I'm in my gym and before Christmas, and there's a transgender person there, and I'm there, and two other older women are there, and oh my God, we're all naked, and so is this person with a penis, but I've got to call this person a woman. I'm sorry, it doesn't, get your own change rooms, get your own unisex toilets, happy for that. And I think, we're focusing on demoralising women, and we're not focusing on, if you were that serious, you'd be really working on where are facilities for us to go to.
Mothers
and
babies.
you're not.
So just picking up on a couple of comments there, Lama Rose, I can assure you that no comments are being removed by anybody in relation to this stream. We do have a filter on that talks about we don't allow publishing of comments with links, and that's simply because it's the quickest way to spam a stream, and we simply, it's more important to get this comment out there. So I'm not sure whether your comment had a link attached, but we're not doing that. We've also had the algorithms. I mean, we're competing, and certainly at this platform here, we've been competing for some time to get this message out. Those that have been following this platform will well know that I've covered a lot about the pandemic, and certainly, we've had certain particular words where our stream has been cut. That's what we're dealing with. Lucy Lou, where does it go next? Well, the mind boggles where it goes next. I'm just going to cut back and show you Jeffrey Marsh, who says that a woman, that the real issue here is men with young girls. Let's see what Jeffrey thinks about that. This is his humour.
Why did the sailors have to stop playing cards? Because their captain was standing on the deck. The deck. Arrgh, arrgh.
So whilst that might be some comedy, make of it what you will, but I'm just going to...
problem with this...
I'm just going to pause the mute, and I'm going to fast forward into the last part. So here is Jeffrey talking about that pedophilia is predominantly young girls that are the victims. Is Jeffrey, from what you've seen there, massive platform. I encourage you not to give any further airtime to this, but simply for awareness, because it's very important that there is a. I mean, once you go and look at these his TikToks, and then it's hard to unhear what you hear. But yes. Jeffrey, would you say Jeffrey's a groomer? Or take that as a rhetorical question? It's hard to say.
I'm in between, really.
Okay, I'll pose this question then. As a parent, if you've just seen what we've showed you of Jeffrey Marsh, would you be concerned as a parent if Jeffrey Marsh sets up a platform that allows young children to talk one-on-one with Jeffrey?
Yes, I would be.
Very unhappy.
Yes, that's right. I think more importantly, because young ones wouldn't understand the dialect here, and with that comes confusion. When the brain is confused, we can easily manipulate. I would be worried. Yes, I think it would be totally misleading.
So, and Dr. Mark, I'm hearing you're in unison with that particular comment?
Yes, especially with primary school children, you want people to be in clear roles of male and female. Only in high school do you have to learn a bit more and realise there are some people who want to be in between. But even in high school, children are still uncertain, and this is the time that paedophiles in particular, trying to win them over. So we have to have some sort of censorship before a person's about 18, because we have to stop children being manipulated. This is the most vital task, because puberty is such a difficult time for all children, all adolescents. So we have to keep this business under control. We have to understand what the Frankfurt School, that's Herbert Marcuse's group, really means. We have to understand the works of Theodor Adorno, Max Horkheimer, and their book called The Authoritarian Personality. They attack the authoritarian personality, meaning anyone who thinks for themselves. And they attack such people, calling them fascists. And they're trying all sorts of dirty tricks to turn people into a bunch of chumps who can be easily misled into sexual misadventures and end up chronically unhappy and embarrassed at what happens to them. This is a whole agenda, and it's been going on now for nearly a century.
Yes.
And Anne-Marie raises the comment saying that children under the age of 18 should not be able to go on TikTok. And, personally, I agree with that. Dr. Mark, you mentioned the word censorship. I'm glad you mentioned that. Not that I'm glad in a sense, because this platform on a number of streams at the beginning of the pandemic, we had 30-day bans. Many of you out there have attracted much longer bans, and we've been able to, or prohibited from putting content out from simply mentioning the name of antiviral medication. And I'm still in fear of mentioning the name for fear of censorship. Yet, let's have a look at this is what Jeffrey Marsh can put out to children on TikTok.
Your parents screwed up. It's okay to say so. That's why I made a Patreon, so that we could talk about it, so that we could connect in a way that has more privacy, so that we could talk to each other in a way that's more open, and stuff that we wouldn't share like in the comments of a video like this. I think you're worthy and valuable, and I wanted to spend more connected time with you, healing together and hearing your deeply inspiring stories.
So as a parent, you should be concerned.
Oh, absolutely. That's total manipulation. If we hear the right language, I'm here to keep it secret, but I'm here for you. Let's connect. You should be okay to feel how you are. I mean, this is all saying, parents, you no longer have a right, you don't exist, I'm coming in and I'm taking over. TikTok is very, very dangerous, and there should be an age limit. Yeah.
And it comes down, no censorship from what I've seen.
No.
A massive platform, make of that what you will, rightly or wrongly. I say wrongly. And, it only takes 5 minutes for a young child, with pressures of life, just to be sitting there, coming across this, because it's topical. The algorithms are geared around towards driving the message out. It pops up on their phone, 5 minutes, and they have that type of messaging coming forward.
Yeah.
And I guess that's where the alarm comes from. So now, I've said in relation to this particular issue, and I've said on past streams about many things as well, geopolitically behind the US, we are 5 to 8 years behind in time frame. Generally, with the COVID pandemic, we seem to be about 6 to, let's say, 8, 9 months behind the COVID pandemic here in Australia compared to the US. On this issue, we are almost at parity. In fact, we're probably about 2 to 3 weeks behind. And I know when I spoke the other day, Raylene, I mentioned a couple of things. There's 2 things that I want to mention. One is that Raylene sent me a link to a statement that former President Donald Trump said back on the 31st of January, and I'm going to bring you that in a moment. Now, set aside the politics, because as I said at the start of the stream, this queer politics is, when has gender identity, when has parental rights been a political decision? So set aside the politics, whether you like Donald Trump, whether you hate Donald Trump. But one thing you can say that through I guess it started with the Obama administration and then it moved down to Joe Biden. Joe Biden is pushing forward. Over there they call it gender affirmation. Something similar to that you'll see in a moment. I'm not going to play you the whole clip, just going to play you the key message. Let's see, as a parent, would you agree with this?
The left-wing gender insanity being pushed on our children is an act of child abuse. Very simple. Here's my plan to stop the chemical, physical, and emotional mutilation of our youth. On day one, I will revoke Joe Biden's cruel policies on so-called gender-affirming care. Ridiculous. A process that includes giving kids puberty blockers, mutating their physical appearance, and ultimately performing surgery on minor children. Can you believe this?
So on nothing else, aside from politics, I mean, as a parent, I would vote for that.
Oh, exactly right. I would give anything up to vote for that. I would love that speech here so I could have somebody to vote for. Because whether we like Donald Trump or not, it's straight to the point and he doesn't mess around with his words, and it's exactly what's going on.
And we have, well, that's what they're trying to push and trying to block there. And we have here Albanese, as you've just seen at the head of the stream, that he's pushing for this with Gay Pride in Sydney this week. And we've got legislation coming down the path that will make it a criminal activity for a parent to misgender their child and not to agree. Even taking a child to go and get some clinical assistance or therapy is problematic. If this legislation comes in place, it's
actually here.
It's here now.
It's whether they're actually doing it. So if parents are listening, you're a parent, imagine one of your children coming home identifying as trans, and we're talking about minors, let's say 14 and under, and you're not aware of this, and all of a sudden you want to have a conversation, and they take it, your innocent child takes it that you object, and you don't have time to form conversations and structure concern going forward. And then your next breath, your child is being told by a school teacher that they have the right to call the police, they don't feel safe and they're not listened to. Your child does that. There's a knock on your door, the police are there, and child protection ready to take your child. What is that called? Is that really for the benefit of the child and the parents, which is happening right here, right now, have no say? So it's like someone coming in, grabbing your child and saying, come on, darling, I'm taking you away from this. The questions you need to ask is, how can this be legal? How can you not have any rights? And what happens to your child the minute that front door closes? And what happens to you in court? These are very relevant questions that you want to be asking. You want to be asking your local member of parliament as well. And but just imagine if that were to happen to you, how you'd feel. And on top of that, you're gagged and you can't tell anybody. That is happening here right now. I have two families I know very personally going through this, and I can't help them. And again, I did mention there are over 100 cases in this country. This is just the start.
That's right, and I've only just heard recently that the youngest person, girl in WA, to have her breast removed was only 15, and of course her parents couldn't stop her. And it's this sort of thing, this misapplication of laws, that horrifies me. I mean, at the age of 3, my parents sat me down and told me that my mother was going to have a baby. I didn't know about these things. I wondered if my father was going to have a baby one day. Since I thought, well, if women give birth to girls and men give birth to boys, that would be rather sensible. But I didn't understand anything about it, and it takes a long time to learn these things and the influence it has and the enormous emotional investment involved. And a person, even at the age of 15, is not ready to make big decisions like that. I mean, they have to decide sometime, but to put a general cut-off at 18 is absolutely necessary.
Yes. Yes.
And I think the issue that this legislation, I'm going to bring it back to Western Australia for a moment, that legislation's been brought in secrecy, as well as there is some public knowledge. I'm just going to ask Clayton if you can just bring up the laptop. Thank you. And so this is the Parliament of Western Australia. Now, I just want to show people at home, and I've done this in relation to other streams in the past, because I think in more recent times, more people have become aware, when probably everybody should be aware of politics and what our politicians are actually voting on, the laws that they're looking at doing. But this is a current search as of this morning, and I've just typed in gay conversion there, and it will just bring up, these are the particular Hansards and committee meeting and submissions made in relation to this topic as of this morning, the searches that hit back on this. Now, there seems to be, okay, yeah, I'm just working out, yep, that is going out. I'll just confuse myself here because I've got 3 monitors moving at the same time, and so it is right. I just want to draw your attention back to now. This is a Hansard debate. This is Nick Gorin, who's talking about some of the particular issues. Now, there's 2 pieces of legislation before Western Australia Parliament at the moment. One of them is banning gender conversion therapy. And another one is talking, and I've only just had a quick read of that yesterday afternoon. It's a bill or passage of legislation that talks about allowing people to apply for a certificate to change their gender and the issues that are going around there. Nick Gorin, he highlights this particular case. It does go back to 2010, but there are very, very recent cases, and I read one the other day over in New South Wales. Talks about this particular case where a man essentially has murdered a person. It's horrific. I won't go into the details. The ruling was that Justice Enderby said that there was no mitigating circumstances for this particular crime that he committed, jailed for life. And at that point, that's where the story had changed, until he entered the prison system and then decided that he wanted to, that he had a gender identity disorder, and then wanted to transform. And as you can see, I've highlighted in green there that the court stopped treating that person as a murderer and then started treating them as a medical case. While Hall, who was the offender, was receiving hormone treatment, it didn't curb his behaviour, his sexual predator behaviour, and he raped she, I'm not sure, where it's at there, but raped the cellmate. So thanks, Clayton. I just want to show you. So that's you're talking. That's an adult. So that's what we're talking about. But we're still talking about a person. So what we have here, it's interesting how they talk about afterwards on sentencing that they're no longer treating it as a person that's committed the very serious crime of murder, and they're treating it as a medical case.
Yes.
But that person as a child, or even that person as an adult, and this is the point that we've said earlier, if they came to your clinic, you cannot treat them. You can't treat it as a mental disorder, because if this new legislation comes in play,
I can't
you're
treat.
going to commit a crime.
Any therapist that thinks they're doing therapy by not asking questions and we cannot diagnose, I would really like to know where your code of ethics are. However, back to that prison situation, this is not the first. We have actually, I'm actually in a movement standing for women. It's going to be a worldwide movement, but either way, we've put out a large petition, over 50,000 signatures. It was first brought to our attention last year or the year before about several inmates in a women's prison in Melbourne. But these are women being raped by men who are in for pedophilia, child sexual rape, who don't get treated as a pedophile. They get glorified on a pedestal, you know, let's have our lobster, so to speak, in a female prison, and they rape. So, and our Labor ministers are well aware of this. Let me make that quite clear. It has been presented to them in Parliament, and they've laughed at it with some of the women from Standing for Women and other women that have fought for this for a long time. And so I ask, where are your morals? Shall we expose you for accessory to rape here? Because that's what you are. Shall we expose you for accessory for letting a pedophile off and letting him, which I'll describe as a he, because if he's got a penis and he's raping women, he's not transgender at all. And so where do you get off on calling it that? And I don't care what these women are in prison for. It's still rape. You're not treating it as rape. And I want to know why not. This is real life. This is not just Melbourne. These are prisons across this country, and Labor Party are accessory to it. There's no other way, because they know about it. They don't do anything. But here's the sinister side. Those that are falling pregnant, I better get my hands. Those that are falling pregnant in there, where are these babies going? Because they're not staying in prison. And why aren't you answering our questions around this? And again, it goes back to pedophilia. And I want to know who's making these laws up. And what does that say about our judicial system and who's on the bench there? And what are you all about?
That's right. We're thinking back to Bill Heffernan and what he brought forward in Parliament, and no one acted on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I already know from one person I know was a paedophile high up in the Labor Party, but there must be people in the Liberal Party and other parties who've colluded in this. And of course, it's a secret boys' club,
yes,
much more than anything else. And unless we expose this, we're finished, especially if it's in the upper echelons of the police force, because it doesn't even bear thinking about if the majority of police were paedophiles. I'm certain they're not. But each policeman has to think in his own mind, what is my senior officer telling me to do? Is he a reliable person? I, as a policeman, know there's always a bit of corruption going on, but what is going on at the top? And I have to stand by my conscience and do what I need to do.
And that's right, Dr. Mark. Also, let's look at our judicial system. If we're talking about being honest, and I could say this factually from having 11 years being caught in the system for a child abuse case. I question who you all are in the judicial system. I know for a fact that there's pedophiles and rapists in there. And what are you the ones in charge of these cases? This is really a legitimate question, and I'm not sure how far I can go with all of this. So
well, yeah, and I'm certainly happy to have the conversation. I guess censorship and being deplatformed is always a risk, and that's the problem, and it shouldn't be.
So we can't speak the truth.
We can't, and we should be able to have conversations like this, and these particular, the judicial system. There should be absolute transparency. And of course, we know Mark McGowan campaigned on the gold standard of transparency, and what we have is the leaden standard of opacity. But it seems some of you at home are certainly aware of this particular topic that we're talking about on this panel discussion. Thank you very much for your comments, Kat. I can see you're talking about Denton's handbook here. I'm just Denton's handbook talking about the strategy for TRA. I'm not quite sure TRA that talks about the GI. So I'm guessing gender identity laws in place And then you've also made a reference there, have a look at the business model of youth transitioning. Margaretta, absolutely, this is a horrific subject. How much can we talk about the judicial system? I don't know. But I guess I'm going to use this as a segue to get into, somebody might actually have a definition or understanding of what TRA is for me.
Trans.
Oh, it's the abbreviation for trans activists. Okay. And I guess for those that have just joined the stream, I'm just going to reiterate, we've said at the head of the stream that this is not an attack on trans people.
Definitely not.
So we just
definitely
make
not
that point again.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you've just jumped in, go back at the very beginning and you'll hear Raylene talk about that and what she said, you know, that there are some, you've spoken to trans people who not like the idea of what's happening here. They are telling you that they are concerned.
That's right. And I have family members who are trans, and there's nothing, I love them very, very dearly, just like I love some of my trans friends. This is not all trans people. They don't want all of this attached to them either, and they don't deserve it. They are happily getting on with life how they are, and it is a minority group infecting the world with sickness. And that is what we have to be focused on. We have the gay and lesbian communities standing side by side with us here. And I really don't want all trans being put into this when they don't deserve it either. But the mind boggles when a minority of sinister, not very well-minded people can change the world, take over the word woman with a penis, which you are not, and tell us that we no longer have the language we're used to. I respect people's language for them, just as you must for me. And this is where we're going wrong. We're putting everybody back into a controlled box.
That's
and
right.
life,
The pronouns, yeah.
That's right. And life is not going to work like that.
And I guess I'm just at this point, I'm going to say a shout out to those watching on YouTube. So we've had to kind of rearrange the studio to bring this stream. This is initially how it was set up, but I've done something to bring more watch rooms, and then that involved more cabling. So normally I can monitor comments. I've just had to jump into YouTube. I want to say thank you very much for those watching on YouTube. There's plenty of comments coming in there. I'm going to pick up on one, Anne-Marie. Anne-Marie's, she's putting forward the proposition saying, don't call them your children for a start, call them your son or your daughter. So
yes,
in terms of, because you're not parents, you're the mother and father. So you spoke, Raylene, about changing language and what the lefts are doing to change language. And I guess what Anne-Marie's suggesting there is, same as we saw through the pandemic, that we don't call the mRNA jab a
vaccine.
A vaccine, a quaccine, as Dr. Mark says. So, good point, Anne-Marie.
Very good point, because what is going on with families, a very, very good point, and here's more confusion. And for parents of today, there are families that have other family friends and children, their children. When they go to their homes now, they have to not identify with their birth name, but call them, where is she or her? And some families, okay, good for you, are going along with this. But I asked the question, so what do you call your children if you named them Sarah? What do you call her now? Her, she, come here? What is this? That's for me, the language alone doesn't even set the premises for intimacy, love and connection. In fact, it separates. And all of this and what's going on today is a separation of the world and people. And we're falling into it. But when we affect our children and parents to the way that's going on and confuse them, and a parent gets in trouble for not calling their daughter her, she, as opposed to the name they named her, Sarah, we've got a real problem here. what are we doing or manipulating our children to be? Robots for the future?
That's right. All this agenda is basically to create a whole generation of half-witted people who will just be very stupid to do the menial jobs, and ultimately to replace all people with robots. So these very few at the top keep their own children separated, and so they can rule everything and basically wipe out most of the human population. That's their intent, and it comes from the Frankfurt School, which comes from the Marxist ideas of Marx and Engels in a book called The Origin of the Family, Private Property and the State, which basically said that the family structure, male and female, was turning the female into a slave, and they tried to assert that there was such a thing as group marriage, in other words, indiscriminate sexual activity between males and females, and that the children were raised indiscriminately. And we can't find any evidence of that. We don't even find that amongst animals.
Yes, yes, which also leads me in that we haven't discussed yet, which is even, well, it's not worse, it's on par of, the mind boggles, if it, you know, that even doesn't sum it up. Started in America, the furs we refer them to, and they dress up as animals with their kinky stuff. And now what we're seeing, it started in America, and it actually is here. I'm in disbelief, and to parents, my God, what a world we're sending our children into. Are you aware that in actual fact we've moved on from gender affirming? Yes, we have. We're into animal affirming. Do you believe that? Children are affirming as a particular animal, and now we're told, and in schools, to affirm that child. It's been going on in America for some time. I mean, where is this really leading to? And that, as far as I'm concerned, professionally and personally, now that's very sick. If we are teaching children to be an animal and affirm as that animal, really, where are we headed?
That's right.
It's not education.
You could see that coming on much earlier. When I was little, I used to look at Walt Disney comics, and when they had various animals with human-like speech, etc., that was all right. But I always felt very uncomfortable when they had human characters drawn mixing with the animals. It destroyed the illusion and made me feel very uncomfortable. And now that I've grown older and see even at the Perth Zoo, they're having little children dressed up as animals, etc., this is the agenda that Disneyland, etc., has been pushing. And you see this in many cartoon series where humans and animals are blurred.
Yes, that's right.
And I think a couple of comments there. You know, we're talking about. Firstly, I want to say that somebody has made a comment here from YouTube saying that they have 2 teens in high school at the moment, and this issue is absolutely rampant. So I really don't know what to say to that other than thank you for watching the stream. Thank you for your comment. And then after this stream, I guess you're not going to see this. I've said this before, and I'm addressing comments now on YouTube. Share, share, share. That is the only way that a conversation of this nature can spread, is by sharing, because you won't get that content out there. Let me just
I think
get
it's
the name
also
right.
important.
Nobby's saying, sorry, I'm just going to say, Nobby's saying that the only grooming that really should be done is people grooming their pets, their dogs.
Yes, well said.
Yeah.
But that's right. That's exactly right. I think we need to add here the importance, because I mean, really, we don't know what's going on and where we're headed to. However, the most important family value that we come back to is communication. And I really feel that parents, you know, put a blind side to what's going on and talk to your children about, well, not a blind side, actually talk to them about what they think about it, what is their understanding. Let them know your views. Don't put pressure, but communicate what's going on. There are so many young teenagers desperate for adult understanding here. Adults are the same. We don't know where the kids are at. Our kids are confused more than ever, and they need your help. And we need to talk about the truth and how you feel with it and your concerns. Equally, the youth of today, there are plenty coming to me worried. They're talking about they don't understand their peers. And so it is what you're saying, Lindsay, discussion, but bring it home as well. Talk to your children. Tell them they don't have to buy into this. If they don't like it, they don't have to like it. And create maturity and understanding around these topics, because everybody needs that now.
And I guess if you're not bringing it home, to pick up again, changing the narrative, as Anne-Marie is suggesting, if you are a mother or a father, that your kids, apart from watching perhaps Jeffrey Marsh on TikTok, which I've just said, they're listening to, as a comment's coming through here, they're listening to Billie Eilish. They're listening to, we only need to look at some of the footage that's gone around of Sam Smith at the Grammys just recently, and things like that. So, you know, there's many things. So again, thank you very much for those that are sharing and commenting. I'm trying to flick between Facebook and YouTube, and I will just try and get a jump on Rumble and load that up. What I am going to do, Raylene, come back to, you mentioned the judicial system, how much you can say you have personal experiences here, and you, I guess, for the sake of not, there's been no boundaries put on you, but you're mindful of the fact that this stream can't get pulled because something, you know, it doesn't meet a community standard. So you've drawn the line on that about some of the known behaviours of those in the judicial system. Where can we get to? Who really knows? Where would we like to get to? Now, we've played what Donald Trump has said. The first thing, if he gets in president, what he will do is pull these laws back. Recently, 6 days ago, we had Matt Walsh in the US who fronted Tennessee. That's his state where he sits, and those will be familiar that I have put some of Matt Walsh's stuff here previously. I talked about Desmond the Amazing with the drag show on that stream back in November. Matt Walsh came in and fronted a Senate, what we would call the equivalent of a Senate estimates hearing about 6 days ago. Let's take a look at this.
Had the opportunity to testify at a House committee hearing to voice my support for legislation banning the castration and mutilation of children in Tennessee. And then the lawmakers on the committee had the chance to ask us questions. And the first question came from a Republican who had a very fair and relevant query about the oft-repeated claim that medically affirming, quote-unquote, trans-identified youth is necessary to decrease their suicide rate. Here's my answer to his question. Well, the claim that, doing the chemical castration drugs or surgery or hormonal intervention, the claim that this prevents suicide or has positive psychological effects down the line is utterly, totally baseless. There are no credible long-term studies that bear that out. And one of the reasons for that is that there couldn't possibly be any credible long-term studies because we've never done this to kids on this scale ever before in history. So this current, shall we say, crop of children, they are the guinea pigs. This is all experimental. We're sort of trying it out on them to see if it works. The number of trans-identified youth has skyrocketed in recent years. We're talking about exponential 10x, 20x growth. Just huge numbers have increased. And what we hear from the pro-trans side is that, well, this is not a social contagion. It's just that, there's always been this many trans people. It's just that they were not in an affirming environment before in history, and so they couldn't come out. And now, for the first time, trans people have the ability to live their truth, so to speak. Well, if that's the case, then we should be able to look back in history and find just this unbroken, incredible epidemic of children mysteriously killing themselves because they weren't being affirmed as trans. And what you find is that that didn't exist. I mean, the youth suicide rate has increased exponentially alongside trans affirmation. The Democrats on the panel had the opportunity to refute, but they couldn't refute it. So the next question, or what pretended to be a question, came from a greasy little hack named Caleb Hemmer, who, rather than discuss the issue at hand, instead decided to try and smear me with that Media Matters hit piece from my time as a shock jock morning host 15 years ago. So I'm curious if 16 is an adult in your view. Why does this bill have the minor defined as 18? So that's a hit piece you took from Media Matters, from something when I was a radio host 13, 14 years ago, my early 20s. It's also not an accurate reflection of what I actually said. I was talking about the fact that people tended to marry young historically And that's all that was about. How does that relate to this subject?
Just curious of your definition of if you feel like people are adults at 16 should.
No, people are adults at 18. I mean, do you think that a 16-year-old can meaningfully consent to having their body parts removed? Do you? No?
We do not. Yeah, we ask the questions. It's not. It's. Representative Hemmer, you are recognized.
He obviously couldn't say no, that 16-year-olds can't consent to having body parts removed, because then he'd be agreeing with me and with the legislation. He doesn't want to do that. But he also didn't want to come out and say yes, that 16-year-olds can consent, because that sounds horrific and insane when said out loud, and it puts him in the position of having to explicitly defend a totally indefensible proposition.
So there we go. Thank you, Janelle. I see that you've just joined the stream. You've picked up your notification and some feedback for yourself, Raylene and Dr. Mark, that everything that she's heard, she's just joined the stream about 10 minutes ago, that it's resonating with her and she believes it's 100% accurate. So there we go. What comments about that, Raylene?
There's just so much there, but isn't he spot on?
Absolutely.
You know, we need... So why aren't people like Walsh, and there's hundreds out there and in this country doing and promoting the same? Why are we fighting to be heard? Really? This is about human life, and yes, it is about humanity. How can you alter a child, adolescent body when earlier I mentioned from the, in particular, age 12 to 25 is really when the brain develops to maturity. Along that way, as we do know, and with young people going through puberty, you know, throughout the decades, it's confusing, it's tough times, and whether we're in today's world or yesterday's, we are confused. We're confused about love and intimacy, we're confused about our bodies, and really we've bypassed a fundamental area because it's just changed in language, and it's called body image. Most people and young people, I was one of those people. You know, I'm thick set. I'll go personal for a moment. I grew up very solid and muscular. I wasn't a man, or I didn't think that. However, I thought perhaps I should be because of the build I was, and I went through terrible body image. And that's what's going on here. We're calling it gender issues, but get rid of it all and look at that individual person in front of us. We've still got social media promoting slimness and all these body issues and faces that, you know, quite frankly, are gone Frankenstein. And we're not there again for our kids, our children. Get back to conversations. Families need to talk about body issues. How do you feel with what's going on? What do you see with that body out there? Are you comfortable in your own skin? Because by the time I was in my 20s, I'd suffered, you know, myself psychological issues of body image. And it took me decades to find a right therapist. Oh my goodness, it's just, I knew where it came from, but I'm not transgender. And this is not anything new. For decades, decades, in the 50s on, we've had body issues, and we need to just deal with the basics.
And whether it's a body issue thing as well, and talking about dealing with the basics, comment coming in saying in their day as a teenager, you had mods or you had rockers, and then later you had the emos, and then you had the goths. But now they're saying the comment is you have dogs or you have cats. And in preparing for this stream, and it's only really just sort of happened in the last 24 hours, and there was many articles that, like I said, at the head of the stream, my eyes are still rolling. I'm talking about a school over on the East Coast that have put kitty litters in school change rooms. Because,
oh my gosh, does that not say everything?
Yeah, furries at the school. And, you know, there is a particular case. And I mean, I've also mentioned this as well, you know, and this is leading up to the federal election with the racial discrimination. I think it's section 38(3) or 6 or something of that particular bill federally. you know, and I've had this discussion because there was two things that they spoke about in Parliament on that, and one of them was a Christian-based school, so they enrolled with a particular faith in mind, and that Nathan wanted to become Nathaniel. Natalie. Nathan wanted to become Natalie, and she said that she will now be going into the girls' toilets. Of course, the school said no, and then there was some mediation that took place. The school agreed to build a unisex or purpose toilet for Natalie to go into, and that wasn't enough. And then that's the Labor push for this bill. Now, Labor had a chance to vote on this before the election, and as I mentioned before the stream, they held off on this to make it a political platform, and it now makes sense why.
Yes.
So that so just trying to bring some of the comments coming in, I can see that, and there's still people watching. So thank you very much. We have been going for a while now. I guess if you are a parent. And going forward with this sort of legislation, or a parent that may have these type of issues, what do you say? What do you say to that? What Anne-Marie says, if you are a mother or a father and you have these issues at home, what do you say?
First of all, it depends if your children are identifying as that. You would want to just listen, not object, but just listen and ask where they formed this, and do they know of anyone else, you know, are other children thinking the same? Because when, you know, if other people, children are thinking the same, this is a little mini cult or a trend, and we can treat it as such. And, you know, in my day, someone mentioned rockers, etc. You know, some people had all these safety pins in their ears and all these beads underneath skins came later with tattoos. This is a cult. This is a trend. It's a phenomena. And I think for parents, don't be shy of just speaking the truth. Just don't be blunt. Be kind and gentle, because we really want to know where our kids are at. We also want our children feeling safe that they can talk about this and talk about any topic. And I really think that parents, you know, may need to say, look, not sure, you know, if you're not sure about it, say, I'm not sure about it. I don't know how this works. Let's look into it together. Right. But if you're a parent, what I'd strongly recommend, and if you were thinking of counselling, be very careful where you go with your child. Don't go to trans or gender clinics, because they will convert. Ring up therapists and ask if they're affirming. Don't go near them. Find therapists that can, family therapists, children therapists, that don't do that, and you've got a better opportunity of just being real and talking issues through. And it, you know, again, there might be a situation where your child is trans. However, wouldn't it be nice to know that you've gone everywhere to allow this to form correctly, as opposed to abruptly and abusely? So
this legislation, though, is shutting that window down.
Well, parents have to get together and fight this, like we are. We're in a backseat barrel here.
Yep.
That's right. We can't get on mainstream media. I wonder why not. These are human lives we're talking about. Parents are just the same. We get cut off on social media. Women are cut off globally for years if we talk out about this. What does that tell you? But parents need to... there are, Standing for Women have parent groups as well that are involved, so perhaps we could put that online if people were interested. But there are a lot of parent groups forming with concern, and unfortunately, that's the only advice I can say, is get your groups together and protest and form an alliance, because we have to find a way to stop this dreadful child abuse happening.
That's right, and I think it's very important to realise that as many of these children have been abused and they start seeing what's going to happen to them in the next 5 years or so, they'll finally realise that they've been gaslighted, they've been conned, and people like surgeons made a hell of a lot of money out of them in order to mutilate them terribly, and they realise the rest of their lives are going to be very unhappy because they cannot detrans. They can't go back to anything like
Yes.
they would have been otherwise. And we've got to get that message out, and those people who do convert, do try to be the opposite sex, once they become regretful, we've got to provide a media platform for them
Yes.
so they can prevent others going the same corrupted route.
Well said, Dr. Mark. And that's also what's going on, where there are so many detransitioners and they're thrown to the dump. And we have to ask, seriously, why? What's going on? But I think also getting back to affirming therapy, well, I just think it's a disgrace. If I can't ask questions of a person in front of me of their childhood, gee, aren't pedophiles getting off again? Once again, the deep, dark
not
web.
according to Jeffrey Marsh.
But look at Jeffrey. What a confused individual.
Yeah.
A manipulator, a con, a scammer. That's what I say to Jeffrey Marsh.
The only thing that I probably did glean that there is some hope, and it's, as you say, that there needs to be a unity. People need, this is a battle, it's a war. Dave
Yes.
on YouTube makes the comment, you know, that we need to stand up, and we've heard this particularly over the last 3 years, you know, to for what our vets fought and died for.
Yes,
and you know,
absolutely.
it doesn't matter what dimension you think that they went to create a free democracy. It also includes having children to be free and children. So thank you, Dave, for your comment there. The comments, and it's come through on Facebook and YouTube. And Crossidoni, I think, is, I'm not sure if that's how you're saying it. It sounds like you are a mother or a father, but saying the importance of having this conversation, especially now, the beginning of a new school year, and making your children aware that they are going to be confronted with some of these
Yes.
issues in the school place, and how potentially they might be able to strategize as a family unit to offer a filter, a coping mechanism, or something in place. So
Yes.
that's a very good comment. Thank you very much for that one.
I think also, if I were a parent today, I'd want to ask the school what their opinions and what they'd be teaching my children. Are you teaching my children sex ed at a particular age, which I'm against? That's my role. You can come in and say, that's my role, that's the parent's role, not yours, and I don't wish my children to participate. I think we really need to hammer in on the education system because it's not appropriate. And as a parent, I have the right to know what's going on with my child and who's teaching it. So don't be shy there as well. But it is, talk to people, and you will come across parents that totally disagree with everything I've said today. And that's okay too. But I'm here for the children and my own rights as a human being, that I'm being and we are being discriminated against. It's not the minority, it's us.
Yeah, I think it's also important to note that we have to look at the religious objections to this too. Of course, most people in this country are Christian, but one of the problems is that St. Paul says in Romans somewhere that in heaven or in the afterlife there is neither male nor female, but everyone is in Jesus. So there is a tendency in Christianity to desexualise those who are going to be the leaders, the priests, etc. And so there is this agenda which the Frankfurt School, etc., can latch onto. It is a bit different in Islam, because in Islam and the afterlife you do have continued sexual differentiation, whereas of course in Judaism there's no teaching of the afterlife whatsoever, whereas in Buddhism you're trying to go through the reincarnations till you reach nirvana, which is the extinction of consciousness. So we're going to have a bit of a problem trying to negotiate with religion there. I had to bring that up because people had told me that some of these Christian schools were actually pushing this transsexual agenda, and I got quite a bit of a shock at finding that.
It's a good point. I mean, back to parents in school, what I am aware of is some schools have made unisex appropriate toilets. However, don't think they're safe, because who knows who's going in there. Another question to ask a school is, do you provide these facilities for children? And if so, which adults monitor it? Because I can tell you there's not many adults monitoring it, and unfortunately there is sinister things going on, and that is backed by some evidence, and this is, you have every right to be concerned, and equally you have every right to ask those questions from the school you're sending your children to.
I think it's accurate to say that the number of unisex toilets, particularly in Victoria, in the past 12 months, it's exponential. Over the school holiday periods, they've been madly converting their toilets. It's no longer male, female. It is it's wherever you feel. So.
And there's the danger. I think how disgusting. We need male, female, and in between. If we go on social media, the in between's called custom, and so we need to provide those three facilities. But going back even to women, you know, I'm expected to put up with a man in the change room or the toilets. Well, I'm sorry. And it's not actually against you. I've got one of my best friends of 46 years is male. We love each other dearly. And to this date, even, you know, if he comes over for a swim, I turn my head away when he gets changed, if he's, you know, in his jocks. And so this actually isn't just focusing on transgender and being deterred by that. This is my right as a woman to have respect.
That's right. See, it's most important what you've said there. When I went to primary school, I went always to state schools. My primary school was co-ed, so was the high school. But an incident occurred in which a boy pulled off a girl's knickers, and what they had to do, they had to declare a whole quadrangle for girls only. That was where the female toilets were, and the boys could only walk through a certain corridor to get out. Yet previously in this school, which had been going for about 6-7 years before that, they'd always mix the children together. But obviously, girls need a place where they can be free of all boys, and certainly you need female toilets. And it's a shock that they should convert them all to unisex toilets.
Yep.
This is a recipe for disaster.
Yes.
And females need toilets where they can be free. A third set of toilets, I have to accept is a good idea, because sometimes you have an accident and one whole toilet block has to be cleaned, so you've got an alternative in the meantime while it's been cleaned and repaired.
Yeah. And also with that, I mean, it is important, and it's our dignity. You know, we do have periods. Young girls are getting younger with periods.
Yeah, age 9 now.
That's right. Exactly. So, you know, how dare these people?
It's all this McDonald's. See, the girls become too fat for their age, and fatter girls reach menarche earlier than thinner girls. It's very, very pronounced, and that's why you're getting this problem now.
Yeah. Oh, look, I think we still need to cater for all, just so, you know, we are. However, again, back to parents, these are questions I would be asking. And what happens if my child does not want to go in the toilet with a male? I mean, what do you do there? Push her in? You know, then what do we call that? Again, this is not discrimination. It's just a God-given right of a woman. I haven't got any issues about my male best friend, but we'd never be seen naked in a change room together. It's just simply how it is.
I think a comment from Mad saying the whole world's gone mad, and I agree with that. And but one thing that Mad says, coming back to the schools and mothers and fathers and the like, is we've seen, and again, to reflect on and we would be foolish not to reflect in the last 3 years, that our schools have failed our children.
Oh, yes.
So you can't...
Yes.
Because universities now are very left-wing, and there's a very clear path of... There's a conversion happening there, and that's an indoctrination. And then that passes on from... onto our school kids. So I guess that, as hard as life is, the role of a mother and a father it has never been more important than now.
Yes.
And there's a tremendous amount of pressure. It's not an easy road, and you can ill afford to drop your guard for but a moment, because if you don't, they're going to be swept up.
That's right.
In what's happening within the school system.
Exactly right. It is very scary times.
We're seeing it in our public libraries now, and it won't be long before it happens. And it's a common thing that an activity. I remember many things as a kid growing up. The sort of activities or what would you call them? Art things that were presented in a school, and now you're going to be seeing more and more drag people, and there's still, and we covered this previously as well, there's still actually no, and that was the case with the City of Fremantle event, there was no feedback from the City of Fremantle whether those that were teaching children to be part of the drag shows actually had, whether the City of Fremantle set the requirement for a working with children's experience. And
yes, doesn't that make you question it?
Yep.
I have to. Most people have to, and yet this group don't. I mean, everywhere we turn, every corner, there's a big fat question to our politicians who are creating this discrimination and separation. But these people are narcissistic. It's all about themselves. I mean, and getting back to the universities, what a disgrace. Our universities, really there's no such thing as psychology. That's just thrown out. We know that sociology has already been thrown out, and now they're getting rid of biology, heaven forbid, because it's about male and female. So, I think we need to be questioning our education at our universities and how this has happened and what are they gaining by discrediting academia. Because just in this country alone, let alone the world that's been fighting it for much more longer, we have professors in these fields, associate professors and doctors who right now are fighting for their credentials, and we're talking about 40 plus years of academia and clinical experience. Yeah. What does that tell you about our universities who taught them in the first place? So we have to question there as well. Our universities, what is the big end game here?
Well, that's right. I mean, the universities have been taken over by private interests.
Yes.
We used to have the universities run by the state, but gradually private contributions have become greater. And now that they've taken over, they basically tell the doctors and other researchers what they have to research. If you're injured by these COVID jabs, etc., you get no funding. If you want to investigate transsexuals and surgical scar healing after that, you'll get all the funding you like. But
yes.
What's important will not be dealt with at all.
Yes. Yeah. And I find it interesting that with transgender, that taxpayers pay every cent of this right to the day a person passes. Yet if I have a child that's dying and needs medication that will save them, I can't have it. So please ask that question to yourselves and to your local member as well. These are questions. I'd be having a list to my local member and demanding that people get back and answer them.
Well, just on that, so you talk about your local member. So is that an effective, is that an action that mothers and fathers can do?
Yes, definitely. I think the more they do it, we hope, we can actually only hope, we're not certain, but we go there and it allows Labor ministers to do something. And if they don't, well, it's back to get united with standing for women, parent groups, because we're in this war alone. And really, if mainstream media aren't covering it, let's question them too. But if we don't have a standing and our politicians are so dirty and corrupt, and I don't care calling it what it is from my view, where does that leave this country? It's not democracy.
I think one of the things that I wanted to say, and I'm just going to try and bring something up in a moment while I do that, but we're talking about the schools and what's happening, and drag queens going into schools, whether they're in our state libraries now. City of Bayswater have had a number of events over the last couple of months, over the summer. putting this stream together again. I mean, just, if we look at this this image just here, I mean, this is only just one. I was able to find, and when I look at that and I just see this young child, this young girl here, and the confusion on her face, I think any mother and father can see that that's confusion on the face, and what's the story of the book actually about? And that's probably the tamest title. Many pictures that I could find like what I've used then, but that's the tamest title that I could find on a book, that it's actually right there in your face, that Mary no longer has a little clam. Mary has a little worm. I mean, I don't, so, and that's probably the best way that I can put it. So, yeah, Dr. Mark?
Yes, I think that when you mentioned it was Bayswater, I actually thought it may have been Bassendean, because you know about the boy from Bassendean, don't you? Rolf Harris.
Yes,
yeah.
That's right.
So it's been here for a long time, and it's seeped into our culture. I mean, I can remember they used to have Timey Kangaroo Down Sport. It was every second song on the ABC. This is back in 1961, 1962. So we've been saturated very subtly by this, and so it's just grown into our culture. But yes, little children are confused because the gay pride parade always has lots of pretty colours. It attracts children. But the children, of course, entirely innocent and don't know what's going on, and they're too young to understand.
Exactly.
As I pointed out about myself when I was 3.
That's right, and hence why they shouldn't be subjected to it at that age. And parents should have a right. It's your children.
That's right. The parents need to have enough sense to see that.
Yes.
See, the parents have been gaslighted by the lies from our mass media, etc.
That's right.
They've been encouraged to abdicate their responsibilities, and that's also been the other Frankfurt School agenda, promoting feminism, which basically means forcing women into the workforce, so two people have to work to keep a family going, so the mother and as well as the father don't have enough time to educate the children properly, and little children grow up believing that both parents have to work, and I as a little boy or girl had to be dumped into a childcare when I was 3. And so people don't remember being at home and having a happy or at least ordered family life.
So I am going, because I can see that we're going, and thank you, Raylene, for your time. We sort of said, I know that it's getting mindful, we had no intentions to go as long as this, but I am going to start winding it up now. And thank you again to all of those at home with your comments. I'm trying to flick between the two. And Dr. Mark, for your comments. But I think it is, again, and I've said it a few times and I'll keep saying it, this conversation needs to be ongoing, and there needs to be more. And hopefully this we may do similar.
Fantastic.
In the
There's
future,
so much more to cover.
To that. We'd love to have you back here, Raylene. I'm going to end perhaps on this. I'll just give one last call out on YouTube and Facebook. If you have a question for Raylene or Dr. Mark, then you've got 5 minutes, I guess, to get that through, and I will put that question to them. Apart from, well, the question, it's more of a statement that Nobby's saying is, why are we not considering bringing back the death penalty for some of these crimes? I mean, you know, when some of these comments come out, and we laugh and we see it, and I look at the unfortunate tragedy of the 16-year-old girl down on the Swan River that was taken by a bull shark, it seems, and the resources that they went in there to hunt down that particular, because of the heinous crime. Now, when sharks start coming into the car park and killing people, then go out and start killing sharks.
Yeah.
But, you know, and we have heinous crimes being, you know, committed. Now, it doesn't have to end in the death of a person. The psychological trauma caused is a lifetime.
That's right.
And that is a heinous crime in itself. And yet, you know, we have, as I've alluded to with Nick Gorin saying, that the system now is such that they're no longer treating a person for the crime that they've committed. They're treating them as it's a gender identity. Or really, it's glorified, because they're not gender in some
cases, if we look at the men who are pedophiles going into women's prison raping, that's not gender issues. That is a man having his cake and eating it too, and that's our politicians, both male and female, allowing it to happen. They are aware of it, so why can't we call them out as an accessory? But I did want to go back to one situation that Dr. Mark, we were talking about earlier, and from Walsh, in regards to data and research. One thing we do know that's still relevant, I haven't brought up, is generally 10 years after transition is where we see suicides.
Yeah.
And so getting back to the topic of suicide, we're not seeing it earlier, so therefore puberty blockers are working. That's garbage, utter garbage. And really, there are plenty still of suicides of trans people a few years after surgery and even halfway through surgery. And that's a fact that we're not covering, because why? Those people aren't classed as important. But 10 years after is where research does show significant amount of suicides. And who is going to be responsible then 10 years down the track, and why haven't we incorporated that?
That's right. Of course, it hasn't been done, because if you get transitioned when you're older, another 10 years of age, you're already past your reproductive years. But for young people, they haven't realised it yet. And if they're 15 when they change, they're 25 and they think, I can't father children, I'll never have a child myself. Why the bloody hell did I transition to the other sex?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not as beautiful as the people of those who were born that way. What the hell am I?
Yeah.
And I think just exactly on what you're saying just there, Clayton, if I can ask if you can just bring up the laptop again. So this is a particular link here, and it's why detransitioners are crucial to the science of gender care. And look, I won't read it all out because, as I say, we've been going for a while. But Dr. Kinnon McKinnon and a person, so 37-year-old transgender male and assistant professor of social work of the York University. Here is the person that has authored this particular document, and that's exactly the issue that they're talking about. In this case, this professor is trying to say that the conversation around when somebody wants to detransition is just another whole different conversation that is just built with even more obstacles.
Yes.
And goes on to say there's this particular doctor here, which I'm highlighting now. She essentially says that it's less than, the highest you'll find is 1 to 1.5% of any kind. She's talking sometime down the track when a person has transitioned. But then Professor McKinnon says, well, no, that's actually not the case. So an interesting article for you to read then. I'll just bring it back up. Sorry if it's making you a bit dizzy there watching at home. Why detransitioners are crucial to the science of gender care. Now, I'm probably just going to end and say this. Not that I would say that you should spam any person, but you have, as a mother or a father, a right to ask questions, be heard, and hopefully get an answer. But Dr. Anne Ali, who is the federal member here in Western Australia, she's the member for Cowan, and in the electorate here that I've covered as well, she is the Minister for Early Childhood Education. Please don't go ringing her office and asking questions. I'm not saying do that at all. I'm not saying that if you called either the number on the bottom here, 08 904 4517, or if you actually emailed Dr. Anne Ali and asked her some questions of where she stands in relation to this, please don't do that. I'm not saying do that at all. You might find some details here. Let's just have a look.
You won't get a response.
So, and similarly in relation to the phone call, because you won't, because Dr. Anne Ali is in Canberra at the moment because Parliament is sitting. But Anne, ANNE.ALY.MP at aph.gov.au. And if you want to take some time out of your day, which I'm not advocating you do, then the person that you could probably direct some questions to would be Dr. Anne Ali, being the Federal Minister for Early Childhood Education. Thank you, Clayton. Back to us.
And good luck, though, with that.
Yeah.
Because I have tried calling, I have had a discussion with her, and she completely denies understanding or knowing anything of what we've talked about today. And the times I have approached her office and left messages, I'm still waiting for a call back, Dr. Anne Ali, because we do want answers, don't we?
That's right, and with Canberra especially, we have to remember that Canberra is the Freemasonic centre of Australia. It is the biggest inland city, and I call it the inland vampire. It takes all our money, and all it does is push transitioning and controls the agenda at universities, etc., along with international financial organisations, and is basically a cesspit to which Australians are drawn and distracted, thinking they're going to get something good out of these corrupted politicians.
Yeah.
So don't get your hopes up.
That's right.
Well, I mean, how about this? We'll put the challenge out. Dr. Anne Ali, I guess I will reach out. I will reach out. I'm not saying you do it, but I'm going to do it for this purpose. Raylene, if I could get Dr. Anne Ali, she's not far from the studios of Freedom Media
I
WA.
would love it. I would
if we could
love
have
it,
an
Linz.
open discussion, an open debate. Dr. Anne Ali loves going on Q&A, and I guess to be fair, as with the format that Q&A has transitioned to, and there's the word transitioning, so she should be right up on that, we'll give her an opportunity. Would you be prepared to table, let's say, 3 questions to give to Anne Ali, to give her forewarning to come in and present her answer?
I would love to, absolutely. I'd also go further and produce the photos of what her early childhood teachers are teaching our children, because we do have photos of little cards telling them how to put condoms on. Remember, these are kids in primary school, grade 1, 2, 3. And I've sent them to you, Lindsay, as well. We have photographs, and I would love for her to explain what sort of education that is that she's signed off for.
Right. Yeah. Well, there we go.
I welcome it.
That's a project that I will undertake. I'll give you that undertaking then. I'm just doing a quick scan here of any comments just to come forward and see. It has been a long stream. Raylene, again, many thanks for coming in at short notice. There was absolutely no question in your mind to come in and generate this conversation, and I thank you for that. For those watching, Dr. Mark, as always, you know, it was a late call last night, and here we go. So
I'd like to also thank you, Lindsay, because as we have mentioned throughout the program, it is very, very difficult to get any media coverage here, and so this is really, we've set aside today is the first time that I'm aware of that we've actually had an open discussion about the truth and the reality of the chaotic world we're living in and how it represents or doesn't represent us going forward. So thank you for allowing this and for a continuation, hopefully, in the future.
So, and I mean, it doesn't stop. This is just the conduit. It actually rests with those of you that are watching, those of you that it's now your duty. What you can do in relation to this is to share this stream with your family and friends, because by sharing this stream, the conversation is not over. They will have an opportunity to watch this. Press play as you're driving on a long drive and just have a listen to this. It's a good way to do it. You don't have to see what's going on, although there is video, but you can do that. And there's an opportunity for you to make conversations in relation to this stream. So that's why I ask, and I continue asking, the most important thing, it's not what I can do, it's not what you can contribute to, Raylene, and yours, Dr. Mark. It's what you can do, and that is share this stream. So thank you very much, and we ask that you do exactly that. So from myself, and thank you, Clayton, who's behind the scenes producing this, and a job well done again. Dr. Mark, for coming in, and for those that have stayed with the stream on Facebook, YouTube. I wasn't able to get Rumble up trying to do that. Thank you very much for watching and